All right, good Wednesday afternoon, and welcome to Let's Talk About It, your weekly radio talk show brought to you by the Alzheimer's Association of Greater Cleveland. I am your weekly radio talk show host, Frederick Knuckles, and I am excited to have you joining with us today on this bright Wednesday afternoon. We're so excited for you. Each and every week, we invite you again to join in and to visit our website to learn more information about brain health and Alzheimer's at alz.org. That's alz.org. We're certainly wanting you to get information and certainly to partner with us, become part of our extended family, and learn more about this disease and the resources that the Alzheimer's Association has to assist you as you navigate this journey. Each and every week, we try to bring you something or someone to come and talk to you about brain health, um, other forms of dementia, and just education around the health issues, disparities that underserved communities experience. And so this week, as every other week, we certainly have a guest with us today. He's no stranger to the Alzheimer's Association, to the city of Cleveland. He's our Health Equity Coalition's chairman in the person of Devin Jones. Good afternoon, Devin. How are you?
Good afternoon, Pastor Nichols. How are you doing today?
Hey, man, I'm wonderful. I'm happy to be alive and certainly to have you on with us today. Talk to us today, Devin. What are we going to talk about today, man? We're going to let you lead and facilitate this conversation today. What are we talking about, Devin?
Well, we are talking about the subject of brain health, right? We're going to focus on how it is that brain health happens. How do we maintain brain health? And we're going to talk about a very important study that the Alzheimer's Association conducted recently called the U.S. Pointer Study. We'll talk about how these different tactics that we can use in our day-to-day habits can help protect our brains.
All right. Before we do that, again, for those of you who are listening, I invite and encourage you, as always, to invite someone to be a part of this time together. Certainly, if you know someone who's experiencing issues around brain health, cognitive decline, I certainly want them to be a part of this time together today. Again, it is my hope and my prayer that after these next 30 minutes have expired, that you would leave more educated, more prepared to share information and to know about brain health issues. Again, we have one of our community educators and volunteers who's a professional in brain health, who works for the Case Western Reserve University. I can't give you all of his title. We got a long title. Devin, go ahead and finish your title. Case Western Reserve Education. Continue, Devin. Pick it up, man. Pick it up.
I'm a program manager. We focus on research into memory loss and dementia at the Department of Population and Quantitative Health Sciences, which is a part of the School of Medicine at Case Western Reserve University.
See, I didn't remember all that. I'm sorry. I don't have all that up here, man.
I didn't know all of
All
that.
right, so let's get started, Devin. Let's do your thing, man.
Yeah, so today, what I would like to talk about is the importance of brain health. And when we think about Alzheimer's and dementia, a lot of times people feel as if it's a natural part of the aging process, and it's not. What we have learned through research and understanding Alzheimer's more closely, yes, there is a genetic component to it. Yes, if you have it in your family history, a person may be at a higher risk for developing Alzheimer's and dementia. But the story does not start there or does not stop there. There's a deeper understanding that we're beginning to understand about Alzheimer's and dementia and how it impacts individuals. And one thing that we learned is a person's day-to-day habits, their lifestyle choices, impacts their risk and or protective factors against Alzheimer's and dementia. Recently, the Alzheimer's Association conducted a study called the U.S. Pointer Study. And you all can find it at alz.org//US Pointer. And it gives this idea that if we give folks a guide to how to live and what to focus on, we can help increase their protective factors against Alzheimer's and dementia.
So let's talk a little bit about those protective factors. What are those protective factors, Devin?
Yeah, so the way that they divided it, they focused on physical exercise, number one. And so what they suggested is 30 to 35 minutes of moderate to intense aerobic activity 4 times a week, plus strength and flexibility exercises twice a week. So making sure that a person implements a consistent workout schedule It doesn't necessarily mean super intense. They don't have to become bodybuilders or track stars, but they are using some form of continuous exercise to improve their aerobic and anaerobic function. And then, secondly, health monitoring, right? This is really important. Going to see our primary care physicians and making sure we do those regular check ins on blood pressure, weight, and lab results so that we know what we have, what we may be at risk for, and what to look out for in the future. Then, number three, nutrition. What they had is adherence to the MIND diet, which emphasizes dark leafy greens, berries, nuts, whole grains, olive oil, and fish, and limits sugar and unhealthy fats. What they're essentially saying is we want to get as close to as possible a whole food diet from farm to table. A lot of times we see a lot of different ingredients that are highly processed, a lot of different meals that are highly processed. But when we're focusing on the mind diet, we want to emphasize dark leafy greens, berries, nuts, whole grains, olive oil, and fish. And we want to limit our sugar intake and unhealthy fats like butter or margarine. And then the last factor is cognitive exercise, right? Using some type of mental stimulation on a consistent basis to keep our minds sharp. That could be computer-based brain games or training programs 3 times a week for 30 minutes, plus regular engagement in other intellectually challenging things and social activity. These things kind of make up what we think of as cognitive exercise or cognitive engagement. And so the US Pointer Studies brain health recipe is physical exercise, 30 to 35 minutes a week, health monitoring, regular check ins, nutrition, the mind diet, which is easy to find, you can Google it, and last but not least, cognitive exercise, at least 30 minutes per week, or 30 minutes at least 3 times per week.
So, Devin, we talk about this U.S. pointer study and how important it is. The things that you just said seems like, right? It appears like it's just common everyday sense, things that we can do. Are you suggesting, Devin, through this pointer study, that if I do these things, that I reduce my risk of cognitive decline? Let's just go on and just talk a little bit about that, Devin.
Yeah, so what the research study showed was that for individuals who took part in it, they seen improved cognitive skills through focusing on these 4 different pillars. I think when we think about our health and our lifestyles, there are a number of things that we could also do in addition to physical exercise, cognitive engagement, check-ins or health monitoring, and a healthy diet that we could do. One of the things I like to refer to often is the 10 Ways to Love Your Brain flyer or infographic that the Alzheimer Association has. But when we focus on those 4 pillars specifically, we are seeing an improvement of cognition and also a decrease in the risk for developing Alzheimer's and dementia.
So, Devin, a question for you. Why is this important to underserved communities?
It's important because I think when we talk about Alzheimer's disease, I think we think about the condition and the disease, and we don't necessarily focus on what's more important, which is brain health. Number one, it's never too late to focus on your brain health. It's never too early to focus on your brain health. And when we think about the US Pointer study, although they may have used participants who were later in life, these are things that a person at whatever age could focus on and make sure that throughout the lifespan, they decrease their risk for developing cognitive decline. And so it's so important that we think about this whole condition of Alzheimer's and dementia from a different lens, and we focus on brain health. And what are those lifestyle choices that we can do to maintain our brain health and our cognitive engage or our cognitive skills?
So, when we talk about brain health, Devin, we always think about invasive treatments and protocols. Talk about brain health from a non-invasive, typical everyday way, Devin, that we can, improve our brain health, our cognitive health.
When we think about our brains, we have to think about them as our central control system of our body. It does everything or it controls everything to what we think, feel, and do. And so our brains are essential not only to what we do and how we interact with people, but how we function. And so, if it's important and it controls every function of our day to day life, everything that we do could have an impact on it. From how much screen time we consume, to what we're eating and putting into our bodies, to how often we work out, to what type of social situations we put ourselves in, to our mental health. And so, what I think about, when I try to explain it the easiest way, the brain has a part in everything. And so everything we do can impact our brains. And so on a day to day basis, we want to think about picking up habits or letting go of things that have a negative impact on our brains as well as our bodies. And anything that is healthy for the heart is good for the brain. Anything good for the lungs is good for the brains. And conversely, anything that's bad for the heart is bad for the brain. Anything bad for the lungs is bad for the brain. It's all interconnected. So this idea of brain health connects to our whole bodies and what we choose to do on a day-to-day basis.
So you mentioned something about letting go of some things to improve brain health. What are some of those things, those habits that we have uh, that increase, the possibilities of cognitive decline that we do every day that we don't think about that's impacting our brain, Devin?
Yeah, just to name a few, really good question. Number one, we want to think about smoking. Smoking puts someone at a higher risk for heart disease, Alzheimer's and dementia, and several other bodily conditions. Number two, not protecting our heads, like when we're riding bikes or when we're doing physical activity. We want to make sure that we protect our brains from any type of traumatic brain injuries because that impacts the cognitive to condition. Number three, I would say getting enough sleep. If a person doesn't sleep well, they probably, in most cases, will not think well. Another one is being socially isolated. If we are not engaging in normal social activity, it becomes a risk factor because we're not able to express or let out certain things. And we as humans are social beings. When we are social, it improves our quality of life and our mental condition. Just to name a few.
So, mentioning that, Devin, I guess a question that some of our listeners will probably be asking or thinking is we were in a pandemic. Most of us were socially isolated because we were afraid of contracting COVID. What impact did that social isolation have on our brain health? And did we see an increase of folks who were diagnosed with the disease?
Yeah, so just to handle the first half of that question, when we think about the impact that COVID-19 had on us, number one, that social isolation led to things such as depression, bipolar disorder, anxiety, trauma. And so we saw a huge increase in mental illness. Number two, what we saw was people became more attached to screens such as phones and the things that come from phones like social media and things of that nature. It had a very negative impact on people's mental condition, and we've seen an uptick in anxiety and things of that nature. What we also seen through research is a 17% increase in cases of Alzheimer's and dementia. And so
17%. That's a major increase, Devin.
yeah, well, it came from, and there's a lot of assumptions to what the social isolation did, but also people weren't able to go and see their doctors on a regular basis. So a lot of those cases that developed during COVID went undiagnosed until later.
So, what are we seeing as a result of COVID-19, of the pandemic? What is it, 2 years later now?
Hmm. Yeah. So number one, I remember when we all decided to go back and be public again and engage in social activity. I think that there was a large change in how people conversed and people interacted. There was a certain level of fear of getting too close to people or getting too social. Even 2 years out, we're still seeing examples of that. Secondly, I think that when we think of social isolation and what it does, I think it changes people's perspective on what the world is and what it's like. When someone is more isolated, they begin to have different views or perspectives of the communities and the world that they live in. And that can be very damaging. It can change how someone perceives their place in community. And so a lot of the backlash from COVID is a result of a degradation in community and people's ability to be a part of community. I don't think we talk about that enough. In addition, like I mentioned, a lot of people didn't have the opportunity to see their doctors. A lot of people went without doing certain procedures, went without having access to certain things that they needed. And that had a long term impact, which led to more diagnoses of conditions that might have been, in other cases, preventable. And so there's still a lot of responses to COVID that we're seeing in our older adults and our youth and our adults in general. And I think it needs to be studied more. I know a lot of people talk about long term or long haulers, those who have COVID and have long term symptoms of it. That has been more and more researched and to understand how it plays into other conditions like Alzheimer's and dementia, diabetes, or heart disease. And so there are a lot of connections or webs of connection in regards to Alzheimer's and dementia and COVID-19 and how it impacted people's bodily health, social health, and physical health.
So we're in 2026, and we're talking about the U.S. pointer study here. And I want to also encourage our listeners to certainly visit our website at alz.org. That's alz.org to get some additional information and certainly print out some information about brain health, but certainly the U.S. pointer study. And there's also another wealth of information that you can gain from our website as it relates to resources and other things that you can do. So let's talk about ways, Devin, for our listeners to exercise their brain in 2026, in July of 2026, because we're thinking that we got to do some things that are out of the norm. So let's talk about that because reading is important. You're using your brain to read. You talked about screens, Devin. What I'm discovering now, even with our seasoned saints, um, is that a lot of folks are spending time on the internet, on screen time. Is that healthy? How healthy is that? What kinds of exercise should I do to really exercise my brain?
Yeah. So when we think about cognitive engagement or cognitive exercise, I want people to think about this idea or this saying: if you don't use it, you lose it. Right? When we think about all of
Grandma,
the
grandmama used to say that to me, Devin. If you don't
yeah,
use it, you're gonna lose it.
yeah, going back to what I mentioned, our brains are our control system. It has over so many functions that happen on a day-to-day basis. Our brains are made up over 1 billion neurons that are always firing to help function the body or to help the body function. And so when we think about challenging our brains, it's things such as exercise, physical exercise that help challenge the brain because it helps make that connection between brain and body. When you think about reading, reading is important because it helps keep our brain sharp and helps us develop knowledge in certain ways. When we think about tactical things, right? Hands-on things that can help someone like puzzles, Sudoku puzzles, writing, journaling, all of those things that we can use physically and have tactile experiences with are also important. I think when we talk about screen time, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but we have to talk about what type of screen time. Scrolling on social media does not help. It doesn't help anyone who is older or younger because there are certain things within the algorithms that attract people to either positive or negative things based off of their consumption. And the goal for different platforms is to keep you on there long enough so that they can sell advertisement and keep you engaged. That doesn't mean that they're trying to test your brain or they're trying to challenge your brain. There are different computer games that you can access that are on screens. And so it depends on how you use the screen time and what you do with it. I think we have to be very mindful that during COVID, we've seen a huge uptick in screen time and what that incentivized for social media platforms and the internet in general is we have to keep them engaged on the screens. We have to keep them in a space where they need the screens and they're attached to it. And so we want to be able to find things that challenge our brains but doesn't stress us out, doesn't put us in a place of social isolation, and doesn't make us feel as if we have to be there to feel comfortable. Another thing about challenging the brain is social engagement, as I had mentioned. You can do things and play games with people. You can exercise and do that with people. There's a level of social engagement and how it ties into your cognitive functioning that it helps challenge the brain. And when you begin to stack those different protective factors like social engagement and physical exercise, or social engagement and cognitive challenges, a person is getting double benefit.
So, we talk about social engagement and um, not being socially isolated. You hear people talk about day programs, that are out here, computer labs, programs at the libraries, um, programs that seniors have at different community centers. How important is that? How vital is that right now, Devin?
Well, it's essential because everyone needs some level of structure. And when people don't have access to resources or organizations that provide that level of structure, I think it makes it harder for them to incorporate these different healthy habits. When you are in a space, let's give a senior center, for example, they have certain competencies and certain things that they have to reach. They have certain goals as far as programming that they have to reach. And so when you're able to participate in them, it is a structured regimen that they are creating that is usually evidence based or research based to be beneficial for the participant. And so the senior centers as well as the libraries are essential. I think one thing we really want to be mindful of is how do we use this access? How do we use the access to these different resources? A lot of times we don't take advantage of them because we don't know that they're there or we don't know how to access them. And so I was just presenting at Benjamin Rose Lakeshore today. And so before I arrived, they were playing bingo. They had a regimented lunch with certain vegetables, meats, proteins, things of that nature. And so it's a really good example of how having a structured space where seniors could go and engage can help set the trajectory and help set healthy habits for when they leave those centers. And that's what's really important.
This is helpful information, Devin. And for those who are listening today who are considering, the possibilities of decreasing your possibilities of cognitive decline, I want you to consider the possibilities of engaging with others, being a part of a book club, going and engaging in the library, Bible study groups, certainly communicating with people. Devin talked about, now I understand why our forefathers were so sharp. They played, solitaire games. They were always engaged in card games. They were always busy challenging one another. And I think we've lost that, Devin. We've got a few minutes left, but let's talk about how important that is um, in our, I'm going to say in our youth, Devin, of engaging our youth so that we don't get so far left that we find ourselves experiencing cognitive decline earlier and earlier in life. Let's talk a
Yeah.
little bit.
So, as I mentioned, I think when we talk about the topic of Alzheimer's and dementia, it makes people think of it as an old people's topic. And of course, it does impact older adults at a larger rate. But what we have to think about is the underlying topic of brain health. Anybody at any age can begin to build healthy brain habits. And I think when we talk about our youth, they need an example of what that is. I think our youth is in a space of having all of these different sources of technology. Some of them even think for them. And I think it presents a special challenge of how to best utilize those different technologies or resources while still keeping themselves sharp and prepared for what the future may hold. And I think that's where the example of older adults come into place. We have to clear this generational gap in what we think of as connection and knowledge, because ultimately, with access to all this information, doesn't necessarily make a person smarter. It doesn't necessarily change their health outcomes. It's about connecting knowledge to wisdom. And we have to make sure we're making intergenerational connections that help empower youth to understand how to use the tools before them, but also how to understand themselves, the people around them, and how to maintain a healthy brain. And so it's all about bridging those gaps and making connections that are genuine and that actually help improve the outcomes instead of just providing information or access to different things that may pass time.
So let's talk about it, and let's end with this. And again, I encourage and invite you to visit our website at alz.org, alz.org. And certainly, if you have any questions or concerns, to certainly pick up the phone and visit our helpline at 1-800-272-3900. That's 1-800-272-3900. To get a live person on the other end, not AI, who can discuss what you're experiencing and help you navigate those processes. Let's talk about, Devin, to end the show today, the importance of intergenerational connections. How important that is, engaging our young folks with our seasoned uh, uh, citizens.
Yeah, I think, especially for communities who are in this space of being underserved, I guess is the technical term, but what I think is unsupported in ways that are necessary. We are all that we have. And, I think when we think of older generations, they understood that we had to support each other in ways that we didn't understand. I don't think we necessarily understand today. And so those intergenerational connections, I think, make it easier to understand how we could be social, how we can support each other, and how we can make deeper connections that are able to be lifelong improvements. And so when we think of intergenerational connection, I believe that we're talking about passing wisdom along. Solomon said there's not necessarily anything new under the sun. But when we think of our youth, these are some of the first times they're experiencing some of these things in the world. And so they don't know how to perceive certain things or certain changes that the world is going through. And I think that's where the wisdom of older adults or people who are older than them come in. But in that same token, the younger people know how to work all of the technology, all of these different things that are coming about, and they can help empower people who do not have access or do not know how to work it. And so they feed off of one another. They add value to each other. And I think that that's really an important part of it because sometimes I think people think of older adults or people who have the wisdom as being more important. But there's a give and take here. There's a mutually beneficial relationship when we think about intergenerational connection.
So I guess as we leave and sign off today, the challenge goes out to our younger folks as well as our seasoned folks. Um, let's make a connection. Younger folks, find you a seasoned person, an older adult, connect with them. Make a commitment that you're going to do the very best you can to engage, to provide an opportunity for them to learn from you. But also our seasoned older adults, make a commitment to connect with a younger person, share the wisdom, share stories. I think the importance of storytelling has gone out of the window. Share stories, share those conversations of how we made it. Again, the challenge today that I leave you with is connecting. Make an intergenerational connection. It will do both parties well. Listen, thanks, Devin, for joining us today on Let's Talk About It, your weekly radio show brought to you by the Alzheimer's Association. And I challenge all of you to get engaged, to be intentional to learn about, to improve your brain health, to be intentional to learn about ways that you can improve your brain health, to be intentional about engaging someone and talking about brain health together. All right. Listen, thanks again, Devin. We appreciate you for coming on. Until next week, take care of yourself. Be good to yourself. Do all that you can to be the best version of you that you can be. Listen, until next week, take care and be blessed. Have a great week. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dad.